He barely makes minimum wage, my cousin joked at dinner. Then someone switched on the TV, and there I was, standing next to the mayor, getting an award. Everyone stopped eating, forks hanging in midair. You know that feeling when you've been overlooked your entire life, pushed to the side, quietly dismissed, until one brutal, unforgivable betrayal pushes you past your breaking point? That was me, and let me tell you, when I finally decided to fight back, I wasn't holding anything back. For most of my adult life, I, James, have been the quiet one in my family. The guy you barely notice at gatherings, usually tucked away at the far end of the table, just quietly eating. While my cousins and uncles are swapping stories about their latest promotions, their big business ventures, or their ridiculously expensive vacations, I'm just there. I've learned to let it slide, mostly because I absolutely hate confrontation. Plus, I know where my real priorities lie. But there's only so much a person can take before the cracks start to show. See, I work in community development for our city. It's a job I'm incredibly passionate about, but let's be honest, it's not exactly glamorous by my family's standards. My days are packed with long hours, endless planning meetings, and working hand in hand with nonprofits to breathe life back into struggling neighborhoods. I love it, not because it makes me rich. Trust me, it doesn't, but because I get to see the tangible, real-world change it brings. The problem is, unless you can attach a flashy salary or a luxury car to your name, my family pretty much sees you as a cautionary tale rather than a success story. And my cousin Derek, he's made it his personal mission to remind me of that at every single opportunity. Derek's 32, works in finance, and loves to tell anyone who will listen exactly how much he made in his last quarterly bonus. He has this infuriating knack for making jokes that land like tiny, precise stabs, subtle enough to be brushed off as harmless teasing, but just sharp enough to really stick with you. Over the years, I've gotten used to it. James probably gets paid in gift cards. He once sneered after I mentioned a work event. Another time, when I brought a homemade dish to Thanksgiving, he actually smirked and said, "Saving money wherever you can, huh?" The room would always chuckle, and I would always swallow my pride. Last month, we had a big family dinner at my aunt's house. The table was practically groaning under the weight of food. The air was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and garlic bread, and everyone's voices were overlapping in that familiar, chaotic way. I was sitting halfway down the table, next to my younger cousin, Leah, who's genuinely one of the few family members I actually feel comfortable around. We were chatting about her college classes when Derek, who was seated directly across from me, suddenly leaned back in his chair, a smug grin plastered on his face. "So, James," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still doing that? What do you call it? Babysitting?" His tone dripped with fake innocence, but I could feel all eyes turning towards me. I forced a smile. "Community development, actually. Working on the Eastview project right now." Right," he said, nodding slowly, like he was trying to remember something utterly unimportant. Then, without missing a beat, he added, "Bet that pays about as much as flipping burgers." "What is it now?" "Minimum wage." The table erupted in scattered chuckles. My uncle shook his head with an amused grin. My mom gave me a small, apologetic smile, and Leah looked absolutely horrified. My face burned, but years of practice had taught me how to mask the sting. I just gave a short, dismissive laugh and focused on my plate, telling myself it wasn't worth it. But then, as if on cue, my aunt's husband walked into the dining room carrying a tray of drinks. Behind him, the living room TV was on, volume low, but the screen was bright. Someone must have left the news running after the earlier football game. Just as Derek leaned over to make another comment, something about maybe one day I'd get a real job, the anchor's voice cut sharply through the room. And in recognition of his outstanding contributions to the city's redevelopment and housing initiatives, James Carter was presented with the Mayor's Award for Civic Leadership earlier today. There I was, right there on the screen, shaking hands with the mayor, a shining medal hanging around my neck, cameras flashing. I hadn't told my family about the ceremony, partly because I didn't want to deal with the half-hearted congratulations, partly because I didn't think they'd even care. But now, the room went oddly, completely quiet. Forks were suspended midair as everyone stared, absolutely transfixed, at the TV. I caught Derek's face in that moment, the smirk faltering, his jaw tightening just ever so slightly. The silence stretched, long enough to feel heavy. And for the first time all evening, no one had a quick joke. That was the exact second I decided things were going to change. I didn't know exactly how yet, but that night planted a seed. The fierce realization that maybe, just maybe, I'd been letting them get away with underestimating me for far too long. The silence that hung over the table after the news clip didn't last long. My aunt, clearly uncomfortable, clapped her hands together and forced a laugh. Well, isn't that something? Anyway, who's ready for dessert? Conversations quickly shifted back to football scores and vacation plans, as if the moment hadn't even happened. I sat there, smiling faintly, but inside I could feel something churning. Not anger, exactly, but a cold, sharp awareness that nothing I achieved would ever matter to most of them. Derek recovered faster than anyone. Within minutes, he was holding court again, telling a story about closing some big deal at work, leaning back in his chair like a king. People listened, asked questions, showered him with the kind of admiration I knew I'd never get from them, no matter how many plaques or medals I collected. Every time I glanced around the table, I noticed the difference in tone. When Derek spoke, it was genuine interest. When I spoke, it was polite nods followed by someone steering the conversation elsewhere. It's been this way for as long as I can remember. Growing up, Derek was the golden boy. He got the bigger Christmas gifts, the louder applause at school plays, the seat at the adult table years before I did. My own milestones were treated as smaller, almost accidental victories, like they happened in spite of me rather than because of me. When I made the honor roll in high school, my parents congratulated me, but my aunt quickly followed it up with, well, it's easier when you're taking easier classes. Derek's lower grades? He's just got too much on his plate. That favoritism never faded. Even now, Derek could insult me in front of the whole family, and it would just be brushed aside as harmless teasing. If I so much as teased him back, I'd get the James, don't be mean, treatment. It was a one-way street where he got to play the charismatic joker, and I was expected to take the punchlines with a smile. Later that evening, after dinner, we all moved into the living room for coffee and dessert. Derek was already sprawled out on the couch, holding court again, telling a funny story about a time in college when I supposedly got lost trying to find a lecture hall. The story wasn't even true, but he embellished it with such flair that everyone laughed. My mom chuckled along, not because she believed it, but because going against the current in this family is like swimming into a rip current. I caught my dad's eye at one point, hoping maybe he'd step in, but he just looked away, sipping his coffee. It wasn't malice, more like a silent agreement that this is just how things are. And in some ways, that hurt more than the comments themselves. Things escalated even further when the conversation drifted to the upcoming family trip to Lakewood Lodge. Every year, they rent out this big cabin in the mountains for a weekend. Group hikes, huge dinners, late-night bonfires. It's supposed to be a family tradition, but somehow I've never been fully included. Oh, I get the invite, usually last minute, when most of the rooms are already claimed. I've slept on air mattresses in laundry rooms more times than I can count. This year was no different. As they started talking about the trip, Derek said, "We've already got the rooms sorted. James, I think there's still a spot in the basement if you bring your own cot." He grinned like he'd just offered me the deal of the century. The others chuckled softly, but I noticed Leah, bless her, glance at me with that same horrified expression she'd worn at dinner. "Why can't he take one of the spare bedrooms?" she asked. Derek shrugged. "Well, we already gave those out, you know. Couples first, then kids, then extras." Extras. The word landed like a stone in my stomach. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But in my head, I was replaying that news clip from earlier. The way the room froze, the way Derek's smirk slipped. I thought about how they saw me, how they had always seen me, and realized this wasn't about a room or a joke. It was about the fact that in their minds, I didn't belong at the top tier of this family. I excused myself early that night, claiming I had an early meeting. On the drive home, the quiet hum of my car gave me space to think. I wasn't boiling over with rage. It was something calmer, colder. I'd been giving them the benefit of the doubt for years, and in return, they'd given me scraps of respect, if that. The award from the mayor had been a proud moment for me, but it had also exposed something, not to them, but to me. They didn't know the extent of what I'd been working on, the people I'd connected with, the doors that had opened in the past year. And I realized for the first time that I didn't have to keep those doors open for them. That trip to Lakewood Lodge, it was only a month away. And in that month, I started to see a very different path forward. One where I didn't just let them sideline me again. And then, a week later, Derek made a mistake. One that he didn't realize would change everything. A week after that dinner, I was in my office, going over the final details for a new community center we were breaking ground on. It was one of the biggest projects I'd ever been involved in, years in the making, funded by a mix of city grants and private donations. I'd been pouring my energy into it for months, even sacrificing weekends to meet deadlines. It wasn't just a job to me. It was something that was going to change lives. That afternoon, I got a text from Leah. "Hey, have you seen the Lakewood Lodge group chat?" I frowned. I wasn't in any group chat for the trip. That wasn't unusual. They usually made a main group for planning that mysteriously didn't include me, and then someone would later forward me whatever scraps of info I needed to know. Still, something about Leah's tone made me uneasy. Before I could ask, she sent a screenshot. My name was right there in the conversation. Or rather, the absence of it was. Derek had posted a message that read, "We should just tell James there's no room at the lodge this year. He's better off staying home." The basement was a joke anyway. Several family members had responded with laughing emojis. My aunt wrote, "It's probably for the best. He's always so awkward around the campfire." Then Derek followed up with, "Plus, with all that minimum wage stuff, I doubt he can even chip in for the food. Let's just split it among the rest of us." I read the words 3 times, the glow of my phone screen making the office feel suddenly colder. This wasn't just a thoughtless joke or a casual jab over dinner. This was deliberate. They had planned to exclude me entirely, to not even give me the courtesy of pretending I was welcome. What twisted the knife deeper was the knowledge that the Lakewood trip had been one of the few traditions I still clung to, even in its lopsided, air mattress in the laundry room form. It was the one time of year I could pretend, at least for a weekend, that I was part of something bigger than myself. And here they were, laughing about cutting me out altogether. Leah's message followed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything in there because I didn't want them to know I sent you this, but I thought you should see it." I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone, my coffee cooling untouched on the desk. The usual script in my head, asterisk, let it go. It's not worth it. Stay out of trouble, asterisk, wasn't running this time. Instead, there was just this quiet, steady voice, enough. By the time I left the office that evening, the betrayal had settled into something sharper. My mind kept replaying every little slight over the years. Every time I'd been told I was overreacting, every time I'd been talked over, laughed at, or made the butt of a joke. I thought about Derek's smirk, about the smug certainty that he'd always get away with it. And now I had proof, written words, screenshotted and timestamped. But it wasn't just about catching them in the act. Something had shifted. That TV moment at dinner had shown me I had more influence and connections than they realized. This was my reason to use them. The next day, I didn't go to work right away. Instead, I took a detour, a meeting I knew could change the entire dynamic. I walked into City Hall with a plan forming in my head. One that had nothing to do with the Lakewood trip itself, and everything to do with making sure Derek and the rest of them learned exactly what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. Because if they thought the award from the mayor was the peak of what I could do, they hadn't seen anything yet. The days after Leah sent me that screenshot were some of the loneliest I'd felt in years. It wasn't just the words in that group chat, it was the chilling realization that this wasn't an isolated act. It was the culmination of years of being quietly pushed to the fringes, treated like an afterthought at best, and a punchline at worst. At work, I kept my usual calm demeanor, attending meetings and reviewing blueprints for the new community center. But the moment I'd get home, the silence hit like a weight. My phone would buzz with notifications, family messages about unrelated things, photos of Derek and the others grabbing drinks together, and I'd ignore them all. The Lakewood Lodge trip was coming up fast, and I wasn't invited. There wasn't even the usual last-minute, half-hearted, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, bring a cot," text. This year, they made sure I was gone completely. One night, I sat in my living room with the TV off, just staring at my award from the mayor on the shelf. It should have been a proud reminder of what I'd accomplished, but instead it looked like some sort of cruel joke. Here I was, being recognized by city officials for making my community stronger, while my own family, the people who were supposed to know me best, couldn't be bothered to treat me with an ounce of respect. Leah called a couple of times, her voice soft and apologetic. "I wish I could do more, James. I don't even know why they're like this with you. It's like they've decided on some version of you that's not even real, and they won't let it go." I told her not to worry about it. But the truth was, her words stuck with me. She was right. They had built this image of me years ago and clung to it, no matter what I did. In their minds, I was still that quiet kid who didn't have much going for him. And nothing I accomplished was going to rewrite that narrative, unless I rewrote it myself. But knowing that didn't make the days any easier. The week of the trip arrived, and my social media feed lit up with photos. Derek on the cabin porch with a beer in hand. My aunt posing by the lake. My uncle manning the grill. They didn't even try to hide it from me. In fact, I had the sinking suspicion they wanted me to see it, to know I was missing out. That Friday night, I sat on my balcony with a mug of coffee, watching the city lights and listening to the faint hum of traffic below. It was almost peaceful, but there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. This was supposed to be family weekend. Instead, I was eating reheated leftovers while they toasted marshmallows without me. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was even worth it to keep trying. If maybe the healthier thing would be to just walk away, cut them off, build my own circle from the people who actually respected me. I could do it. I had colleagues who valued my input, friends who'd shown up for me more than my own relatives ever had. But then, like a slow spark catching, another thought formed. Walking away would give them exactly what they wanted. For me to disappear quietly, making it easier for them to pretend I'd never been part of the picture. No. If I was going to go, it wouldn't be quietly. I didn't have the whole plan yet, but I had the first pieces. My connections from the award ceremony, the projects I was working on, the influence I hadn't flexed in front of them before, it was all there, waiting. And as much as it hurt to sit there alone that night, that same loneliness was also solidifying into resolve. I wasn't just going to take back my seat at the table. I was going to decide who got to sit at it in the first place. And I knew exactly where to start. The week after the Lakewood Lodge trip, I threw myself into work like never before. Not out of desperation, but out of absolute, razor-sharp focus. Every slight, every laugh at my expense, every extra or minimum wage jab was fuel. The more I poured into my projects, the more opportunities seemed to open up. Our Eastview revitalization project was nearing its final approval stage, and I was spearheading the push for a community grant that could double its budget. This wasn't just a small step, it was the kind of move that could turn a modest improvement into something truly transformative. And I wasn't just a small piece of it, I was the face of the entire effort. I met with donors, negotiated terms, and pitched to city officials with a confidence I hadn't realized I was capable of until now. It didn't take long for people to notice. Within a month, my name was popping up in local news articles again, not just in passing, but in headlines. Eastview project gains momentum under Carter's leadership. Invitations started rolling in, speaking engagements, networking dinners, even a coveted spot on a nonprofit's board. Each event added to my reach and my credibility. And yet, I kept most of it off social media, not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted control over when and how my family found out. I wanted the reveal to hit at the exact right moment, the way that award on TV had frozen them mid-bite. The shift in my personal life was just as noticeable. I upgraded my small, aging sedan for a clean, understated SUV. Nothing flashy, but respectable. My apartment, which had always been comfortable, got a quiet facelift, new furniture, framed photographs from projects I'd worked on, even a small home office. The space finally felt like mine in a way it hadn't before. I also started saying yes to things I'd been turning down for years: charity galas, mixers, leadership workshops. I made a point to meet people who could connect me with opportunities outside my usual circles. The more I invested in myself, the clearer it became that I had been playing small for far too long. It wasn't just about success. It was about control. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for my family to acknowledge my worth. I was building something so undeniable that their approval wouldn't even matter. And the more I built, the more I realized I could use it, not just to elevate myself, but to reshape the dynamics entirely. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. An email from the city's cultural committee landed in my inbox, inviting me to chair a high-profile fundraising gala for urban renewal. It would be attended by major donors, city leaders, and, as luck would have it, my aunt's best friend, who absolutely loved to brag to my family about her social calendar. I could already imagine the whispers spreading through the grapevine. James is chairing the gala with the mayor in attendance. But the real turning point came when I learned where the gala would be held. Lakewood Lodge. The same exact place they had just excluded me from, only now, I had the authority to shape the guest list. It was almost too perfect. When I first saw Lakewood Lodge in the event details, I honestly thought it had to be a mistake. But no, the cultural committee had specifically chosen it for its scenic location and reputation as the crown jewel of the area. The same rustic meets luxury venue my family had treated like their private kingdom every year was about to host the biggest professional event of my career. As the appointed chair for the gala, I wasn't just a figurehead. I had real influence over every single detail: the theme, the sponsors, the press coverage, and, most importantly, the guest list. The committee provided a base list of donors and dignitaries, but I was given the freedom to send personal invitations to anyone I thought could add to the atmosphere. The power of that pen in my hand was intoxicating. I could invite anyone. I could leave anyone out. And just as importantly, I could control how someone was invited: front row prominence or quietly pushed to the sidelines. It got even better. The lodge's manager, a warm, meticulous woman named Clara, reached out to me personally to coordinate logistics. I'd met her years ago during a small community event I helped organize, and she remembered me instantly. "You're the one who made sure our vendors got paid when the old budget fell apart," she said over the phone. That meant a lot to us. "This event, whatever you need, just say the word." That kind of loyalty was invaluable. It meant I could reserve spaces, shift seating charts, and manage access to certain areas without raising a single eyebrow. I started gathering information quietly. Through casual conversations, I confirmed that my family was already planning their next Lakewood trip, just 3 months after the gala. They didn't know the venue was hosting my event first. Derek, according to Leah, had even joked about finally getting the good cabin room without me taking up space in the basement. It was almost laughable how blind they were to the fact that the ground was shifting right under their feet. I played it cool with Leah, never revealing the full extent of my role in the gala. But I asked her as naturally as I could if she thought Derek or my aunt's friend would be interested in community events like this. She snorted. "Derek? Please. He only shows up to places where he can talk about himself." "But Aunt Claire's friend?" "Yeah. She'd be there in a heartbeat, if only to brag about rubbing elbows with the mayor." Perfect. That was the crack in the door. I arranged for a discreet, beautifully designed save-the-date card to be sent to Aunt Claire's friend. I knew she'd talk, and I knew my family would hear about it from her before they ever heard it from me. Sure enough, a week later, Leah texted, "They're buzzing about it. Derek's pretending he doesn't care, but you should have seen his face when Aunt Claire mentioned the mayor." Meanwhile, I doubled down on making the gala unforgettable. I secured a string quartet for the reception, coordinated a silent auction with high-value items, and locked in a speech from the mayor himself. Every detail was deliberate, a mix of class and visibility that no one could dismiss as minimum wage work. And behind all the formalities, I began shaping a seating chart with surgical precision. People who had supported me in my work, donors, volunteers, colleagues, would be placed front and center. People who had dismissed or undermined me, well, if they got in at all, it wouldn't be anywhere near the spotlight. By the time the final guest list was ready, I was holding something far more than a roster of names. I was holding the blueprint for a night they wouldn't forget, one that would tilt the balance of power in my favor without me raising my voice once. And when Clara emailed me a detail about the lodge's private VIP suites, the ones with the sweeping lake views and the private fire pits, the plan for exactly how this was going to play out crystallized in my mind. The night of the gala arrived, crisp and cool, the kind of early autumn evening where the air feels charged with possibility. Lakewood Lodge had been transformed. Strings of warm lights draped along the wooden beams, the glow of the fireplace spilled across the main hall, the scent of cedar and fresh herbs drifted in from the kitchen. Guests in evening wear mingled near the silent auction tables, champagne glasses in hand, while the string quartet played softly in the background. From my position near the entrance, I could see everything. Every handshake, every glance, every subtle shift in posture as people realized who was important in the room and who was not. I was the one in the tailored charcoal suit, greeting city leaders like old friends, my name announced alongside the mayors in the program. I didn't invite my whole family. That would have made the statement too broad, too impersonal. Instead, I'd chosen my targets with care. Aunt Claire's friend got a prime invitation, complete with her name printed elegantly on a front table card. I knew she wouldn't come alone. She thrived on being the gatekeeper to exclusive events. True to form, she brought Derek along with two other relatives who rarely passed up a chance to bask in social clout. The moment they walked in, I caught Derek's eyes sweeping the room. He dressed well, navy suit, designer watch prominently displayed, but I could see the faint tension in his jaw. This wasn't his kind of crowd. Here, people didn't care about quarterly bonuses or who had the latest sports car. They cared about influence, projects, legacies. And in this space, I wasn't the cousin with the minimum wage job. I was the chair of the entire evening. I welcomed them with polite warmth, shaking Derek's hand like we were old acquaintances. "Glad you could make it," I said, gesturing toward the seating chart on the stand by the entrance. "You're at table 12. His eyes flicked to the chart. Table 12 was near the back, close enough to see the stage, but far from the inner circle of donors and officials. He opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again when Aunt Claire's friend bustled past me, gushing about how glorious the lodge looked tonight. As the evening unfolded, I moved easily through the crowd, making introductions, thanking donors, stepping onto the stage to give a brief speech that drew warm applause. When the mayor joined me for the closing remarks, he clasped my shoulder and leaned into the microphone. "We're grateful for leaders like James Carter who dedicate their time and vision to making our city stronger." Cameras flashed. I caught Derek in my peripheral vision, watching, his expression unreadable. But the best part hadn't even happened yet. After the speeches, Clara quietly approached me. "The VIP suites are ready for the after reception," she murmured. We'd reserved them for top-tier donors and key partners, private spaces with sweeping lake views, plush seating, and trays of fine desserts brought in by staff. Only a select list had access. As people began drifting toward the elevators that led to the suites, I made a point to escort certain guests personally. My colleagues, the mayor, a couple of donors who'd written five-figure checks, all led upstairs to the warmth and privacy of the VIP rooms. Derek and the others? They stayed downstairs, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses above them just out of reach. From the balcony outside the suite, I could see them in the main hall, lingering by the emptying dessert tables, their small talk flattening as more and more people disappeared upstairs. They didn't know the details, but they knew enough to realize they weren't part of it. I didn't have to gloat. I didn't have to say a word. The message was already written in the architecture of the night. Here, in this space, in front of these people, I was the one who decided where everyone stood. And as the night wound down, I knew this was only the first ripple of what was coming. By the end of the gala, the shift in the room was undeniable. The after-reception in the VIP suites had cemented alliances, opened doors for future projects, and more importantly, shown everyone present exactly who held influence that night. By the time guests began leaving, I'd secured pledges that would take the Eastview project beyond its original scope, an expansion into 2 additional neighborhoods. When I finally came back down to the main hall, most of the remaining guests had already filtered out. Derek and the others were lingering by the coat check, trying to look unbothered. Aunt Claire's friend was fussing with her scarf, talking too loudly about how lovely the main hall had been, though her darting eyes told me she was desperate to know what had gone on upstairs. Derek caught my eye, and for the first time in years, he didn't have a smirk ready. His tone was clipped, careful. "Nice event," he said. "Didn't realize you ran the whole thing." "Yeah," I replied evenly. A lot of moving parts, but when you're in the right position, you get to decide how it all comes together. I let the words hang there. Not a threat, just a truth. Plain and sharp. On the drive home, Leah called. She'd been there, quietly taking it all in from one of the closer tables. "You know," she said, "I think they finally saw it tonight. Not just what you do, but where you stand now." Derek looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I laughed, not in triumph, but in relief. It wasn't about humiliating them. It was about reclaiming the space they'd spent years trying to shove me out of. And now that I had it, I wasn't giving it back. Word of the gala traveled fast through the family grapevine. By the time the next Lakewood Lodge trip rolled around, the tone had shifted. Instead of the usual last-minute scraps of information, I got a call from Aunt Claire herself, suddenly warm, telling me they'd love for me to join and take a prime upstairs room. I thanked her politely and declined. "I've got other commitments," I said simply. And I did. Bigger ones. Better ones. As I hung up, I realized something. They'd finally offered me a seat at their table, but I had built a bigger one of my own. And the best part? I got to choose who sat there. That was the moment I knew I was done being their extra. I was the host now.